but I'm having doubts about Keir Starmer now.
Keir Starmer. Was that deliberate or accidental?
He's lost my vote.
He didn't have it, did he?
And I'll come back to you in 4 years.
What are you so cross about, John? It was a really interesting speech.
This is for John in Liverpool. I'm one of the pensioners who's lost their heating allowance.
Now, this LBC caller had an amazing meltdown on Tuesday after Keir Starmer had made his speech in the Rose Garden, if I remember rightly. And I listened to it on LBC's James O'Brien show, and from what I heard after, it was quite positively well received, you could say. Well, John from Liverpool wasn't impressed.
I'll say this, I've been a Labour voter all my life, but I'm having doubts about Keir Starmer now.
Keir Starmer. Was that deliberate or accidental?
No, you just said to that guy there, I want to hear from the public.
No, did you say Keir Starmer by accident or on purpose?
Well, it was a mistake.
No, I love it. I thought it was. I'm sorry, carry on, John. I won't interrupt you again.
I'll get back to the point. You just said to that guy, I'd like to see what the public think of this.
Yes.
Isn't it funny it wasn't in his manifesto, because, about taking the winter fuel from the pensioners?
But the whole point of the speech was to stress that the £22 billion hole in the public finances was unexpected. So, in a way, that gives him a free pass on manifesto pledges, in a way. Yeah,
do you think in 4 years or 5 years, when he's up for parole again, and I say that sarcastically,
Yeah.
When he's up in 4 or 5 years, do you think the pensioners are going to stand by him again?
I don't know. Do you?
No, they won't. Well, I'll tell you what. I'd love to hear pensioners coming on to talk to you, and see how many reaction you get. Oh yeah.
Well, we did. I think we did 2 hours on that last week, and it was largely mixed. But respectfully, John, you don't sound as if you're paying much attention to the speech that we've just heard. You're cross about something that happened a couple of weeks ago, and you're still cross about it.
I'm cross about when a politician tries to be elected for Prime Minister,
yes,
that they don't lie. And everyone's saying he doesn't lie. He's lied. Why did he come out and say, when I'm elected, I've got to take the winter fuel to establish...
because the public finances are much worse than Labour expected before entering government. The Treasury, not the Daily Mirror, the Treasury has identified a £22 billion shortfall this year alone. So
his team, so you're telling me his team, the plenty of team that he's got, never seen that coming? No,
I'm telling you, the Institute of Fiscal Studies said it could be as high as between 10 and 20 billion, but no one thought it would be at the upper end of that, let alone higher than it. I mean, what is it you don't understand about this? I mean, everybody says, nobody's arguing with the shortfall.
If I wanted to look into something, if I was going for something,
yes,
I would get my team and say, look, we want to investigate there. What's going on here?
But the speech addressed this. The speech addressed the fact that they were essentially making spending pledges that they knew they wouldn't be able to keep because they knew they were going to lose the election, and that they were trying to ambush the Labour Party with the...
Well, I'll tell you one last thing. He's lost my vote. He's lost my vote.
He didn't have it, did he?
And he's lost the votes of a lot of pensioners.
Well, we will see. We will see. But
we will see. Yeah, and I'll come back to you in 4 years.
What are you so cross about, John? It was a really interesting speech. He's explained why there has to be a withdrawal of winter fuel payment. You might not agree with it, but you shouldn't let it get to you on this sort of level.
It does, because it's always the pensioners.
Well, you didn't vote for him, did you? Did you really vote for him? Because you sound like you hate him.
Well, to be honest, I am beginning to now. Because
it's great. It's moved very quickly, and so that if I found a £22 billion shortfall in your personal finances, you'd have to make the savings somewhere, and you're a pensioner, so it would be pensioners that got most affected.
Why didn't he put it in his manifesto then?
Because the £22 billion black hole in the public finances had not been established, I mean, literally, John. The massive... I thought he was being a bit too repetitious. I literally found myself thinking, all right, mate, enough about the black hole. Can you get on with what you're going to do to fix things now? But obviously he needed, for you at least, to talk a little bit more about the black hole. It's a hole, and it's black, and it contains an absence of £22 billion. But that doesn't mean that the decision to save a couple of billion, is it? It doesn't mean the decision to save that money by taking away the winter fuel payment from 10 million pensioners was the correct or the fair thing to do, albeit that only 2 million of them, if that's a fair phrase to use, have been identified as being in any way put at risk by the policy decision.
Now, I get the feeling John is quite the emotional kind. But the thing I find interesting about this winter fuel cap is that, as someone who thinks it's a poor decision by the Labour Party, and I'm not keen on it at all, are the number of pensioners who do agree with it. And there were a few people after that phone call who either tweeted or emailed in with these interesting replies to disagree with John.
What is critiquing going to look like? I'm just worried about John's blood pressure, but you're right to point out that the idea that pensioners are always the people that get hit hardest by government is palpably absurd. The triple lock, as Neil in Skipton and many others point out, is the only thing that's been safeguarded over the last few years. It's everybody else that has to suck up the consequences of austerity or government policy. So I don't want to sit here and defend it because I don't like it, as we discussed last week. But if you accept the necessity of doing something, there's a case to be made for that thing being the least bad option. And that speaks directly to what the entire speech was about. Things are going to get worse before they get better. You know? Ideally, if Great British Energy works, then energy bills will come down enough to render the winter fuel payments unnecessary anyway. The idea of still giving money to pensioners to pay their energy bills when the energy bills are no longer prohibitively expensive would be a little bit silly. Alistair speaking about being a future pensioner. David is already one. As a counter to your previous pensioner, I would like to add the following to your debate. I am a new pensioner, James. However, as someone born after the 26th of September 1956, I am denied the winter fuel payment by the actions of the previous government. So all new pensioners have already been denied this payment by the Tories. I think Labour have made a poor decision to claw back a small amount, about £1.5 billion, but I don't understand why the previous actions of the Tory government are not being called out. Well, I suppose what you've done, A, is educate us, because a lot of us wouldn't have been fully across those facts, and B, remind us why the Tories are on fairly thin ice going after this as a policy decision, given that, as you remind us, it's one that they introduced, albeit for a smaller constituency of new and future pensioners as opposed to the ones that were already over the line. Jim's in Glasgow. Jim, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James.
Hello,
Good
Jim.
to have you back. Listen, this is for John in Liverpool. I'm one of the pensioners who's lost their heating allowance, and I'm not angry about it. It's just one of these things. It's economics they were talking about. They had to do that early because they had to send letters out early to people who were getting their heating allowance. Some get it in October, November, December and January. So they had to put that out first to stop everything being printed. That's that. Now, I'm Labour.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a sort of logistical, bureaucratic necessity, which I tried to explain that, but you've done a much better job than me. You could have had a much more long-term, complicated tinkering, right. But if you wanted to smack it early, you needed to do what they did.
That's it. Now, going back to what he said this morning, it's good to have an adult in the room, shall we say.
Yes.
There's no ifs or buts. He's reading it as he sees it, and I quite agree with it. I'm Labour through and through. I've been hit with this. And also, before the Tories left, they also hit me with tax, being a pensioner, because they didn't put the personal allowance up when they hit us with the triple lock. So they take it and give it. That's that. So I'm getting hit with the tax as well.
Not all, obviously, but some of the negativity that was coming into the studio that I didn't read out because for reasons that will become clear, was coming from Scotland, and it was complaints about things that Keir Starmer hasn't had the time to turn his attention to yet, or a sense that we're having English-centric conversations, which is a criticism of me, not a criticism of Keir Starmer. So it's interesting to hear you from Glasgow looking at a Prime Minister in Westminster and arriving at similar conclusions to the one that I've arrived at. Yes,
but could I also just add that I'm going to talk here now about Rachel Reeves in the budget in October.
Yes, all to play for.
Now, he was talking about reforming the House of Lords. Now, what he could do, but to show us that we're all in it together. I know it's not going to cover the gap, but what he could do, and I would be quite happy if he did this, It just shows that we're not all in it. We're all in it together. They get £330 a day to sit in there, and that's one person 3 days is £1,000, give or take a couple of bob.
Yeah.
Now, that would be a start. That would be
just take it off them.
£40,000 a year per person.
A proper reform of the House of Lords would be very interesting, and I think you're right. I mean, you're nibbling at the edges, Jim, of the fiscal pie, as you well know. But sometimes it's not about the size of the slice, is it? It's about the principle of the pie. I mean, and some of the people in the House of Lords. This is why the Tories talking about cronyism is so hilarious. What was the name of that young woman that Boris Johnson put in the House of Lords for reasons that nobody's ever really been able? Was it Charlotte Owens? Literally, she was about 12. And she got put in the House of Lords. Everyone's talking about cronyism because Wahid Ali got access to the Downing Street barbecue for 20 minutes. Extraordinary. But yeah, the House of Lords is a place I'd like to see some serious reform. John says, if you love Keir Starmer so much, why don't you marry him? I think we're both already married, John. And Sam says, genuine question, how long will you give Keir Starmer before you start holding him to account? Mate, you need to know what that phrase means. No offence, Sam, I'm sure that I'm not describing you now. But sometimes people who don't think about things like to happen upon phrases that they think are powerful because they've heard clever people use them. You hold someone to account when they do something for which they should be held accountable. So we held Keir Starmer to account last week for the decision regarding the winter fuel payments, although it did not turn out to be as unpopular broadly as it is with a either directly affected constituency or the slightly idealistic left, of which with which I often flirt, who sort of feel, you know, the magic money tree type accusation, and I don't buy that accusation. But I do think he probably could have found some money somewhere else without going after this vulnerable part of the country. So that's holding someone to account.
And what I find fascinating about this situation is the fact that whenever there's been a debate on this winter fuel cap, there seems to be more support for it from pensioners than against it. And I've listened to a couple of debates. I think one with Sheila Fogarty, but there was somebody else, but I cannot quite for the life in me remember who it was. But the result was the same with the conversations that James O'Brien had last week. They were mixed. And when James O'Brien said that the Labour Party will get more jip from the left, I think he's on to something there, because people who have criticised this, I've recognised their voices before, and in other conversations, they tend to be Corbynistas, you could say. And so I think he's on to something there. But what do you guys think? Is John right? Is Jim right? Or are the emailers right? Let me know down below what you guys think, and I shall bid you farewell and take care, my friends.